Over the years, I have had the opportunity to visit with a number of different people, leaders and followers from every walk of life. And during those times, I've had the privilege of asking them a number of different questions, one of which involved what leaders need to know to help improve their leadership and the program with which they are leading. And it's been interesting to hear a number of different responses, but I've learned that there is a common thread and a common response that most people give when it comes to what leaders need to know to help improve their leadership. And this word that I'm talking about has been something that also fits with the idea of what leaders need to know to help them lead during a time of crisis or pandemic. The word that I'm talking about is communication. When it comes to communication, nothing is more vital during a time of crisis or pandemic than communication. And when I talk about communication, there are a number of different components that leaders need to remember. The first is transparency. And transparency is so difficult. Now, let me state up front that I realize that in leadership, there are going to be times when there are people, there are problems, there are events or circumstances that exist that leaders must hold in confidence. And I'm not talking about those areas of confidentiality. I'm talking about being transparent when it comes to the struggles, the challenges, the problems that we deal with as leaders, especially during a time of crisis or a pandemic. And I realized that as leaders, we don't want to be transparent in those areas. We don't want people to think that we have problems or that we struggle. Well, let me let you in on a secret. They already know. And the more transparent we are about our challenges and the struggles and the problems that we face, the greater our credibility is for those who are following us. And when I talk about transparency, I want leaders to know that it's not just about being transparent in regards to those areas, but it's also about communicating frequently when it comes to those that we are leading. I've never heard a group of people say, you know, our elders, they just tell us too much. We just have so much information, we're on information overload. I've never heard that. What I've heard is really just the opposite. We don't have a clue what's going on because our elders don't ever tell us anything. The frequency that we communicate, especially during a time of crisis or pandemic, is vital. And what I mean by this frequency of communication is that what we must do is provide information, even if it's a matter of recapping the information that's already been given. It may be that we don't have any new information, but recap what has been said, because never assume that people will remember what has been said or that they understood it correctly. Tell them again. And as soon as we gain new information, the sooner we can communicate it, the better. We need to tell them everything that we know and communicate that frequently. And certainly, we need to let people know that if there's not any new information, then tell them there's nothing new. They'll be glad to have heard something from someone. Steve Moore, who is the president of Growing Leaders, talks about the frequency of communication, and he makes this statement that people get down on what they are not up on. His point is that negativity breeds when people are uninformed. So leaders must communicate, and they must communicate frequently with those who are following. Now, when it comes to our communication, we need to use every means available to us, whether that's electronic, by texting or email, or maybe in our bulletins or on our website. But we also need to realize that nothing takes the place of face to face communication. And perhaps the greater the crisis, the more personal the communication needs to be, the closer in proximity we need to be to those people. Communicate. Be transparent, communicate frequently, because people will be thankful to have known what was going on. So communicate to them. But there is one last piece that I want to spend just a few moments talking about. And what I mean is that while it's important for leaders to communicate, they need to speak, they need to let people know, be transparent with them, and share with them frequently the information that's going on, whether that's daily or weekly or whatever means is needed. But communication is also about listening. It's about active listening, or as some have referred to it, empathetic listening. When we talk about listening, it's challenging. Because when people come to us and they want to speak to us, they want to know that they have been heard, that someone listened to them and listened to what they are feeling and what they're thinking and the struggles that they're dealing with. But here's the challenge. When people come to us and they begin to share those things, there's one of two things that happen. One, we begin to start thinking about what we're going to say in response. We're really just waiting for them to draw breath and give us a chance to insert what we've been thinking and what we know to answer whatever it is they have brought to us. The second is we get distracted. There are a lot of things going on around us and we get distracted. And we don't want to seem totally disengaged, so we look at them occasionally, we nod and we give them that, oh, yes, I totally agree. But really, we're just pretending to listen because we're distracted with something else. What can we do to help us as leaders when it comes to communicating and listening to those who have come to us to let them know that they've been heard? Let me share just a couple of thoughts. One is remove the distractions. That may mean that we need to close the lid on our laptop. It may mean that we have to turn off the television. It may also mean we have to shut off our phone or maybe even go to a place where there are no distractions, that we can give our complete and total undivided attention to this individual. Secondly, I would suggest that we observe their tone of voice and their body language. Are their muscles a little more tense than usual? Is the pitch of their voice a little higher than normal? Are they speaking at a little faster rate than they usually do? These are signs that there's something going on here that we need to pay attention to. I've often said that there are 6 messages that take place every time we speak. There's what we think we say, there's what we actually say, there's what the other person hears us say, then there's what they think they heard us say, and then there's what they say they think they've heard us say, and then there's what we hear them say about what they think they heard us say in the first place. And when you couple that with body language and tone of voice, it doesn't take long to realize how challenging it is to communicate, even when we're speaking the same language. So pay attention, observe body language and tone of voice. And the third step that I would suggest when it comes to listening is to intentionally listen with the purpose of repeating back what you've heard them say. Now, think about that for just a moment. It changes the whole dynamic of how we listen because now we're listening with the purpose of repeating back to that individual what we've heard them say. And this does a couple of things. One, it will let this person know that we cared enough to listen and that we listened to not just what they said, but how they said it, the tone of voice and the body language. But secondly, what it does is it gives them an opportunity to correct anything that we may have misunderstood. And the bond of trust that is created by doing so is immeasurable for a leader. Just learn to say, what I'm hearing you say is this, and repeat it, and just watch what happens. When it comes to leading, especially during a time of crisis or pandemic, communication is vital. And it's not just about being transparent, and it's not just the frequency with which we are communicating to those who are following. It's about learning to listen to them, to let them know that they are heard, and to help guide them through this time. Learn to communicate and communicate in a way that others will follow during a time of crisis or pandemic.